I do want to start just with the upcoming meeting between President Trump and President Putin of Russia in Alaska on Friday. What are your expectations of that meeting?
The American people did not vote to cede the field of liberty to despots, to Russia, to Iran, where Russia is procuring many of her weapons that are being cast onto the Ukrainian people and homeland, North Korean soldiers, Chinese componentry. The American people don't want to live under despotic rule. And the work of this administration thus far has been leaning toward Russia, not Ukraine. So our president invited the president of Russia on U.S. soil. Meanwhile, when President Zelensky came to the White House, the president berated him publicly. Think about that. And Russia invaded the nation of Ukraine on the European continent. There are American soldiers' bodies strewn across Europe from the Second World War, which was the second costliest war in American history, fighting for the liberty that was bequeathed to us. We didn't do anything to earn it. Those that were born after World War II. And Russia's now fiddling around on the European continent with many of our allies, including Ukraine. So this is serious for us because we aren't the largest country in the world. We need allies in order to defend ourselves and our interests globally. So what our president does is very important to our own security here at home and abroad. So I'm very troubled about his lean toward Vladimir Putin. And he said a few things publicly, but he basically has stopped weapon shipments to Ukraine, which paused for months. He wants to wait for this discussion. Meanwhile, Ukrainians are getting killed, and there isn't a clear position from the Pentagon to replace declining stockpiles inside of Ukraine, and there isn't a budget done for our own defense. That's been held up all year by the leadership in Congress and the White House, and so they're essentially undermining our own battlefield momentum with all these unnecessary pauses and changes in policy and so forth. So,
I do want to get your thoughts, though, regarding the fact that President Zelensky of Ukraine was not included for this discussion. What do you make of the fact that President Zelensky will not be present as our president meets with President Putin?
Well, I agree with President Zelensky. He nailed it. He said, no red carpet and no concessions to Russian tyrant Putin. Dictator Putin is the aggressor. He pointed out very clearly, Pope Leo, the Roman Catholic Pope, offered to bring both leaders together in Rome, Italy, and to begin the dialogue for peace. And of course, Vladimir Putin rejected that idea.
You mentioned that President Putin, his style of negotiation, it tends to be playing a long game. Should a land swap, as President Trump has proposed, take place? And what do you think would be the consequences of that in terms of the direction Russia takes in this war?
Well, first of all, I don't find the current leadership around President Trump very knowledgeable about that part of the world. And I think that they need to broaden their council of advisors on Russia, on Ukraine, and the surrounding European region. It's extremely complex. It's been through a lot over the generations. And unfortunately, our president seems to be backpedaling with his advisors. So I think that there isn't a team in place to actually negotiate their way out of this.
So what is your assessment of President Trump's ability to negotiate? Are you confident that he can broker a ceasefire? Because based on your current assessment, you don't seem very confident that that's possible.
Well, I certainly hope he can. He has many relationships with some of he has many business relationships with many of President Putin's closest oligarchs, closest supporters. inside of Russia. So I don't know where President Trump's business interests intersect with America's strategic interests.
What role do you see Europe playing in brokering a ceasefire?
Europe is critical, and they are united, and I have been so impressed with their ability to lead forward, to reorganize, because of President Trump's unnecessary public criticism of NATO, our closest military alliance. That was unheard of. So I'm hoping that they will continue to be persistent. They have given clear signal that they would like Ukraine to join the community of European nations, which of course is what President Trump is completely opposed to. I have a map I'd like to send you that shows Russia's 11 time zones, the expanse of Russia. It's enormous, with 130 million people. And then the size of Ukraine at its western edge. And one can just think about that, with Ukrainian people now down to about 20 million inside of Ukraine. They are fighting against the third largest military in the world. And they need liberty lovers to stand at their side, not play with them. So I hope the president pulls an ace out of his sleeve. I don't know that he will, but to date, I think that a lot of time has been wasted and delays cost lives.
And certainly this war, it has gone on for some time. We're now over 3 years into it. And you have in some parts of the country this spirit of isolationism that has really taken hold. Are you concerned about that? And then what should be the response in terms of policy? Because Americans, after a certain point, are going to obviously start to feel that this war isn't going anywhere. So how do you combat that?
Well, first of all, this is a war that can be won. Ukraine is smaller than the size of Texas, and Russia covers 11 times it. So this is a war where we have allies in Europe and other places who support resolution. And that's the road, the diplomatic road that we should be walking down, but we aren't very forcefully. There's just months and months have been wasted. And I can understand people in other parts of our country having job difficulties. My gosh, people are being put out of work in our own region, in Montana, coast to coast, because of the tariffs and so forth that have been imposed by this president. But I think that we have to understand that there are enemies to liberty, and they aren't Democrats or Republicans or independents. They are foreign interests that have a desire to weaken us, whether it's on the energy front, whether it is purveying our assets, trying to disrupt what's happening inside this country in order to expand their own interests. So the Russian nuclear fleet is not friendly to us. And America has to be able to defend herself at home, in our waters, and abroad. And with the melting of the Arctic, things are happening that are changing world conditions. And these societies, these governments, like Russia's government, is a despotic government. It's an autocratic government. It is not an open society or a free society. So we have to have our eyes wide open. And many of the media, you're in media directly, they created TikTok, they created Telegraph. Those were created in this country. And a lot of the content on those stations really is undemocratic. And that's with a small d, where people, every person matters. These countries don't believe in people having the right to vote freely, in having a competitive political system, in being able to improve the lives of all people, and to create homelands where people are well educated and have decent health care. I've been in many of the Russian hospitals. Oh my goodness. Pray that you never get sick there. So we as a country have a responsibility to our own people to protect and defend the United States.
Given those
And so
threats
one
to
can't
democracy that you mentioned, I do wonder, do you believe Russia has faced enough consequences from either U.S. administration for inciting this war? I know President Trump recently brought up a secondary tariff threat and sanction threat, and there was also a bill in the Senate to impose sanctions, but action in neither of those areas has taken place.
Yes. Could it have been stronger? Yes. You're working with a very delicate situation where nuclear weapons can be used, and so the Putin's tactic would be to wear out the Ukrainian people because he can outlast them, right? So it's important for the bargaining table to be able to return the territory that belongs to Ukraine and somehow have a protective shield up there between both countries, because Russia will not rest. Russia wants Ukraine. The Ukrainian people are productive. They are effective from a business standpoint. They have assets in that country, and they've never been free until 1991. They've been at war, by the way, for 10 years, not 3 years.
Given that Russia has made it very clear that it doesn't want Ukraine to be a NATO member, do you accept that that is going to be a non-starter in these negotiations?
I would expect that they will begin with that, but I think long-term, Ukraine's accession to Europe will require several steps, including ultimately NATO, and that is what Vladimir Putin cannot accept. And his country is going to have to come to terms with the fact they have 11 time zones, they have vast assets. They have the Arctic, they have land, sea, and air assets that are enormous, and but to behave in the way Russia has, stealing 20,000 Ukrainian children and reprogramming them. Russia's birth rate is going down because its economy is not growing. It has very poor governance. Russia needs to pay attention to her own country. And frankly, Russia can afford to cede some of its vast territory to erect a defensive wall between both nations.
And I do want to switch gears because this is not the only conflict happening internationally. Of course, Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza, the situation just continues to get worse. What do you make of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza?
It's what is a strong enough word? It's a sacrilege. What is going on there is not human. And the solutions require leaders who wish to negotiate. That has been impossible. Just like to date, the Russian situation. But in Gaza, the Palestinian leaders have been eliminated. They were not leaders I would have chosen for those people because they deserve a homeland. I've supported a two-state solution for a very long time. And I will tell you, I ran into a Palestinian Muslim the other day in Toledo, and this is interesting. He goes, Marcy, I have a solution. I said, sir, I wish you could give it to the world. And I told him to write a letter to the Blade. He said, I'll tell you, there should be one state. I said, one state? He says, yes, one country, one nation. But in that nation should be the state of Palestine and the state of Israel. And then add the state of Syria and maybe the state of Jordan if they want. They don't have to. And I started thinking someone, he began his life in Palestine and he made his way to the United States, and he was struggling to find a way toward peace. And so I favor a two-state solution. He favors a one-state solution with several states. That's the kind of negotiation that people of goodwill should sit down around a table and figure out for that part of the world. But the bestiality, the killing of children and women, it's just, the world wants this to end. It wants it to end. And we were not able to get the food in. I supported all of those efforts and even contacting people here in our region that do food drops. But Israel has to be convinced, and the Palestinian people have to find leaders that can actually negotiate a peace.
You speak about Israel having to be convinced. Can you expand on that?
Well, they are, the Israelis have about 7.2 million people, 7,300,000 people. Ohio has 12 million people, okay? So think about that. Israel's population is smaller than Ohio's, and they exist in a world where their faith expression, their cultural expressions are different than surrounding nations. And so they are always worried about being attacked, and they have good reason because they have been. And so Israel was created in 1948. It's one of the newest nations in the world. And her entire existence, they fought for their existence. So that part of the world, unlike our own, because of our Constitution, is extremely complex in the way they think about sharing power. And only with other global negotiations, starting at the UN, do I believe there will be finally a set of proposals to bring peace to the region. But make no mistake about it, the negotiation that has to occur must bring peace to the entire region, not just one state.
In negotiations, the goal is obviously to de-escalate, but we just in recent days, Israel that has decided to proceed with this expansion of the war into Gaza City. Given how much death and destruction the war has already caused, should Israel proceed with that, and is it a good idea?
I'm not on the ground there, but I think the killing of innocent people is
over 60,000 deaths, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health.
I beg your pardon?
Over 60,000 deaths so far, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health.
Well, I don't know what the exact number is, but I am shocked that there is no special panel that has been set up at the United Nations to at least allow people to speak, to testify, to elevate this to a higher level, because Israel was created in 1948 after World War II at the United Nations. And I don't see any movement there where it must happen. The nations of the world that care, and ours certainly should care, should be a part of helping to launch those kinds of dialogues, even though people won't agree. But then the question for Palestine is, who are those leaders? Who are their leaders? Now that the Hamas leadership has largely been destroyed, who are the leaders of Palestine?
The U.S., given its position as Israel's most important ally, largest ally, certainly has leverage. Should more pressure be applied in order to bring an end to this war, as the United States has been one of Israel's biggest supporters? So can the U.S. play a role in actually encouraging a ceasefire, and how should Congress go about doing that?
Well, first of all, it's the job of the president to be the chief negotiator for the country. And I don't know where President Trump stands on this right now, but I haven't seen him spend a lot of time at it. Have you?
We've had remarks.
But I don't see any special envoys or people that are going there on a regular basis. President Biden tried very hard for his whole career, if you go back and you look, both to defend the boundaries of all nations in that region, like Jordan, like Israel, like Lebanon. But unfortunately, there were bands of very terrorist groups that were always about trying to undo the boundaries of nation states in that region. So we really need, I hope we're reaching a point where other nations in the world, adjoining nations especially, will create that opening at the United Nations. That's where it has to happen. And we can get the King of England to go over there to Israel. We can get President Trump. But what they need is a mechanism so people can negotiate. The problem for the Palestinians is, who are those negotiators? I know one that I think should be a negotiator, Hanan Ashwari, who is a woman with broad experience in that part of the world. I don't know why she and people like herself have not been invited to the United Nations, even for informal sessions of late. But I think that it is in that context where a nation like Israel will see it is in the region's interest to begin to wind down these attacks and the instability in that part of the world.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, some believe that this may be his effort to save face politically. Do you subscribe to that idea that this is also a local issue in Israel to continue the war?
I think it has that dimension. I think that he is trying to appeal to those who elected him. But I said to him many years ago when he came to Washington, he came down the middle aisle of Congress, and I purposely sat on the aisle to say something to him. And I said, "Bring us peace." I said 3 words, and his reply to me was, "It is coming."
Congresswoman Kaptur, I appreciate you joining me today to discuss this as well as the current unfolding situation in Russia and Ukraine. I appreciate it.
That's all right. Thank you so very much.